Hi, I'm Mona Shu.
And I'm Mackenzie Peterson, and this is a special psych session series on mentoring.
Our guest today is Dr. Jasmine Mena, Associate Professor of Psychology and affiliated faculty in Latin American Studies at Bucknell University. Dr. Mena completed her doctorate in clinical psychology at the University of Rhode Island. Her research examines the influence of cultural and contextual factors on physical and mental health and quality of life. She is especially interested in illuminating the experiences of historically marginalized groups and strives to apply research findings in community settings. Her scholarship addresses three interrelated areas: discrimination and psychological distress, health disparities, and critical and decolonial psychology education. Dr. Mena is passionate about working with students on research from conceptualization to publication and every step in between. She is a very experienced mentor who deeply cares about students, reflected recently in her immensely powerful keynote at the Rocky Mountain Psychological Association convention titled Cultivating Students' Sense of Belonging Inside and Outside of the Classroom. Dr. Mena has been on Psych Sessions a few times, and you should listen to all those great episodes. In episode 151, she chats with Garth about teaching, clinical work, and multiracial research. In episode 70 of the Ask series, she answers the question, what is labor-based grading? And recently, she gave us a clinic on DEI, diversity, equity, and inclusion for intro psych. Welcome back to Psych Sessions, Jasmine, and welcome to our series on mentoring.
Thank you so much. It's good to be with you.
It's really exciting to have you here today. So I'll just jump right in and ask you, how do you define mentoring, or what is a mentor?
A mentor to me is just somebody who is interested in you, somebody who cares about your progress. It could be just as a whole human, just as a whole person, but sometimes it's about a part of you. It's about some aspect of some goal that you have, and they are interested in seeing you make that happen. So a mentor could be someone that you don't even know is a mentor, but is helping you to achieve some important goal in your life.
I love that idea of being like an undercover mentor, like not quite realizing that somebody is there guiding you and helping you, but they're doing stuff that is having a huge impact on your life. So I think it's really important to point that out.
And I actually know for a fact that there are many people out there that are mentors to me, but they don't even know it. But
Oh.
I'm growing and learning from them every time that we work together or do something together. But I think they're a mentor. They're a mentor, and they may not even realize it.
Yeah, absolutely.
And also, I think you may not realize, Jasmine, how many people you're a mentor to. I mentioned that RMPA talk, sitting at in that room. It was such a privilege to see you speak. And then I think that's probably the talk I've been to where I've seen the most reaction from students in the room, like the amount of nodding and clapping and just talking to each other. And it was so lovely after that talk, some students who I just met at the conference, without prompting, that would be their highlight. And it was
Oh,
just so amazing how many people were resonating with what you were saying and the importance of your message, myself included. So you're also a mentor to a lot of folks that you may not have, directly interacted with one-on-one, but definitely in that space.
that was an amazing experience, certainly being at the conference. And I think also that a mentor doesn't always at the outset know they're doing it. That's related to that phrase that Mackenzie just coined, the undercover mentor. Because I didn't necessarily expect that the students would react that way, that they would feel so, that it would resonate, that my thoughts and my words and my experiences would resonate with them so deeply. You just never realize when it's happening.
And your definition of taking interest in and caring for, you can do that in so many ways. It doesn't have to be in the formalized kind of contractual or part of a program kind of way that we sometimes think of mentoring. And certainly that happens. And there are great things about those sorts of mentorship as well. I hope, Kenzie. um, but there's also a lot of other kinds of mentoring that don't have to be so formalized.
Absolutely.
How would you describe your mentoring style when you're mentoring, whether in this broader sense or maybe more formalized?
I would say that first and foremost, I try to be very respectful of people's interests and their goals, and what they value, what they find is important to them. This isn't about what I am trying to get them to do, but I am trying to understand what they want to get themselves to do and to see if there's a place for me to help them achieve those goals. Perhaps I have the skills and experience to help them with that. If not, then it's about finding someone else who does. And so my style tends to be developmental in that a lot of times at the beginning, I may offer more structure, more guidance, more support, ask if they want my input, opinion, feedback, like how it is that they want to receive, right, the support from me. Over time, then I let that go and let them take the lead, make decisions, recommend things to me, make suggestions. And I'm referring more so to an academic context, right? Like students. So I tend to approach it very much developmentally that way. But the reason, to circle back to the idea of respect, the reason why it's extremely important for me to take my lead from them is because in many ways we are taught, without realizing it, implicitly, we are taught what is right and wrong. And sometimes that teaching is not consistent with the needs of a person or even a population. And so when we are repeatedly told that we should want certain things and that we should do certain things in a particular way, we could very well be dismissing and diminishing different passions, interests, and priorities that are important to, for example, historically marginalized groups or individuals within them, or even just a person and what matters to them. And so I'm often careful to be very respectful and cognizant that what a person wishes for themselves may or may not be consistent with what this discipline, the academy, or whatever formal structures may be. And those goals might actually not be the best for them. And so if I can't pause and really take in what they need and want, then I might miss an opportunity. And I might actually proceed to impose upon them goals that are not their own. And so it's important to me to approach it developmentally and be extremely respectful of a diversity of goals and perspectives.
Those are such great points. I was going to ask along those lines, developmentally and trying to help students or whoever you're working with to reach the goals that they want, regardless of whether or not those quote unquote fit into what people might think they're supposed to want. Do you have advice on how to help mentor and guide that process? Since I can imagine, and I went through this too myself for a long time, it was hard to parse apart, do I actually want this because this is what I want, or this is what I'm told looks good on the CV, will be impressive, will make other people happy, etc. How do we help students recognize what their true values and goals are and not worry so much about whether it fits into the systems that have been in place?
Oh, wow. That's a great question. I don't think there is one way, and I don't think I have figured out the formula as of yet. But for me, I find it really helpful to separate in my conversations with mentees or with anyone, because I never know exactly who's a mentee, right? So trying to clarify, this is a convention in this field. This is a thing that people feel is valuable and important. It's not the only thing. And so pointing out that there are many different paths to develop a fulfilling and impactful career, if that's what we're talking about, perhaps a career, that these ideas of what's valuable they're socially constructed and they may not actually be in the best interest. So I try to just make the implicit value system explicit and name it and point out how we sometimes recreate this value. We reinforce it. We reinforce a value for certain things because it's what we've learned and what we've been told, but we can think critically about whether that is truly the most important thing to us. One of the things that comes to mind for me is relationships. Because I remember early on having a conversation I was in graduate school, and it was with a peer, a graduate student. And we were talking about relationships. And she raised some sort of discomfort about mentioning her relationship as something that was important to consider in a decision that she had to make. And I remember thinking to myself, my goodness, that relationship is so important to this person that they feel compelled to make sure people understand it's not a priority, it's not going to get in the way. And I thought to myself, that seems unfair, and that seems unjust. And I remember in that conversation saying, it sounds to me like you're proud of your relationship. It sounds to me like this is something that's really important to you. It's really unfortunate that this feels like something that you would have to hide. I didn't have anything profound to say, but for me, it was just like, no, actually, this relationship is quite important to this person, and it should factor in. They shouldn't feel ashamed to include it in their decision making in life. And so just making sure to make room in conversation for all of the factors that are important in our lives, not just one.
Yeah, that's so important. And you're right. We have such a culture of, work should be the top priority. And we're a little sometimes embarrassed to mention other things that we're doing, or we're, rushing to explain, like, I'm taking time off, but don't worry, I'm still checking email, or I'm going to, get right back to this. And there is that sort of outside life is maybe secondary sometimes, that culture. And that can be really, really challenging if, those things may be really what are important to you and should be valued. And it's hard to create that culture of belonging if we can't talk about aspects of ourselves outside of work.
Precisely. Yeah.
I think that's really amazing, everything that you've said so far about describing your mentoring style. I really, as a graduate student, appreciate that aspect of respect and realizing that mentoring isn't like a one size fits all formula. You have to have good communication to be able to understand what people value and what they want to get out of their experiences as they go on this journey of growth. So, just as a graduate student, just want to mention that I think that what you're doing is very incredible and amazing. I'm just a little curious about who or what kind of influenced this mentoring style, or how did it develop over time?
I'm not sure exactly how it developed over time. It feels like the right approach for me. It feels like important to me to understand the full person, and as much as they want to share what else is important to them in their life, it's important to me to validate those aspects of their lives. And so I think the more I've realized how it helps people to feel seen and valued, the more I do it. I think it kind of was a self-perpetuating process that I just reinforced for me that people who feel supported, they grow. They feel like they're growing with you. And so that makes me feel good that we're going someplace important together. So I think that has encouraged me to keep trying it. I've also had some great mentors that have influenced, I have no doubt, my approach to mentoring. One that I've had many over the years. Again, some didn't even know it, but some who did know it. As an example, like my major professor, I went in with one topic and I changed my topic while in graduate school. That's a very big issue. That is not an easy issue to broach. And he grew with me, and he was like, all right, well, we'll do this. We'll do this. And so, that showed me that he was willing to see what I was becoming more passionate about and was willing to support me, even though it was a big change and a big shift. So that spoke volumes to me about respect and acceptance of my ideas, and then being able to invest time and energy and interest into this area with me, alongside me, sent a very powerful message. So experiences like that have shown me the power of feeling seen, respected, valued, and then having someone invest in your growth. Certainly, there have been many more experiences, but that's just one example of something that helped to shape my approach. Certainly, my interest in being critical of hegemonic power structures has always influenced my thinking, because if I insist that students become mini versions of me, and I have become perhaps a version of my mentors in the past, then I'm not actually getting to know that person and how they think and feel and what's valuable. I'm simply pressing on them or imposing on them my way of being. And so my passion and commitment towards liberatory approaches and critical consciousness, liberation from oppression, certainly helped to shape this value, and being able to question that even I may have the wrong idea at any point in time, and I'm still growing. And so, in fact, I have had that experience where I've learned a great deal from my supposed mentees, and they're supposed to be mentored by me, but I'm the one learning from them. And so that has been a powerful experience that has shaped my approach.
I can't help but think as I listen to you talk that as you're mentioning all of these different aspects of your mentoring style and how it developed, I keep coming back to the thought that it's also centered a lot around finding your most authentic self. Like, I feel like there's a lot of authenticity that goes into your mentoring. And I think that's really important because you've touched on it multiple ways, and that we're working on things that we truly value and not just what academia or other institutions tell us that we should value. And we're going into areas of research that feel like they're the best fit for ourselves and not necessarily what our lab focuses on. But yeah, to me, a lot of that is focusing again on that developmental side and that growth, and just focus on authenticity. And I think that's really neat, especially that you're willing to like grow with your students or your mentees as they embark on that.
Thank you for pointing that out. I do feel like I get the most out of things if I can approach it with integrity and humility. And that's really the focus of most things in my life. Is I always am asking myself, can I live a life of integrity? Can I be honest and make the most ethical kind of decision at any moment in time? Even if it's the harder decision. So it's certainly something that influences everything I do. Is, yes, ideas of authenticity, sincerity, and integrity. Those concepts really, and it's a constant reminder, because there are many, pressures in life to push you to put together an image that makes sense. But I have felt the most passionate about my work and whatever I'm doing when I have been the most vulnerable, when I have been willing to say, I really don't know, I'm learning, this is new, I'm sharing what I'm studying, that's all I can offer at the moment. And that's when I have felt the most fulfilled, when I have allowed myself to let go of that pressure to be the expert. I do know a lot of things, but I very well know I don't know many more things. And so if I can embody that, it helps me to feel, it's like a shield, it's like a superpower in a sense, sort of protection, because I know I'm not done learning. I know I'm not perfect. I know I don't know everything. What have you got? What have you got against me? What are you going to throw at me? So yeah, it's a process. And so if I can also encourage students to let go a little bit of that perfection, certainly work hard, because we have to, and it's fulfilling, right? Work hard, but that doesn't mean that you have to know everything. And if I can also approach them with that attitude, it allows their shield to go down, and we can work on what they actually need to be working on without all the barriers, right?
I love that. I love thinking about humility and honesty and being our true vulnerable selves as a superpower, and as that's a way to be strong and get through and just be like, this is me. Like, so what if it doesn't fit some sort of preconceived, very old standard, right? And because I think a lot of times we go the other way and we think, the perfectionism is the superpower or the shield, right? If I somehow can give off the sense that I know everything and I'm the expert, then nothing can touch me. But that's just a never ending treadmill of effort that doesn't go anywhere and doesn't actually serve whatever it is that you truly are passionate about. And I also love, Kenzie mentioned this too, just your wording of mentoring as, growing together. So you talked about the really challenging praxis of actually naming systems, being aware of them, focusing on liberation. That is some hard work, but it's the good work. And I love how that's reflected in your mentoring style and the way you think about mentoring as not in a traditional top down, unidirectional, hey, I'm going to impart this wisdom on you, but not only bi-directional, but also very relational, where it can get messy, right? If you're saying, I'm going to grow with a person, that means I have to get to know that person a little more deeply than just I'm telling them what to do, right? I have to recognize that they might be teaching me stuff. They might be pointing out places where I have big gaps where I'm terribly wrong. And then I have to adjust myself as well. So I think that's such a good example of the challenging power structures. And I so appreciate you talking us through that process.
Yeah, sure. It's something that I'm sure I'll continue to develop because I haven't always been like that. I think that I've learned that this is what feels better for me. This is what feels good for me in those relationships, in mentorship, because I certainly can remember times where, especially earlier parts of my career, where I was feeling like it's my job to make sure this person succeeds in these particular ways, because if they don't succeed, it's a reflection on me as a mentor and I have failed them. And so then you approach that relationship differently. But early on, that wasn't working well for me. It didn't feel right. Something always felt was lacking. And so, I mean, that I would say what I do today reflects something that's been changing over time. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. And related, we've touched on DEI a little bit, and that's certainly a very large part of your work. I'm curious how that might have shown up or not for you within the context of mentoring. I know it's research and it's all these other things as well. So your mentoring experiences, whether as a mentor or someone being mentored, what role has DEI played?
When I was being mentored, a lot of my work always has focused on DEI, so I had to be working with someone that was comfortable in that realm as well. And I think one of the things that stands out, and other people have mentioned this before, but that the mentors, they rarely matched my own identities. And if they matched my identity in one way, they didn't in another, some other important way. So that's definitely, it has been important that they have the ideological commitment, the commitment to the EDI work, the interest, the motivation, expertise, whatever it was that they were willing to work on those areas with me, even if they themselves did not have the same identity as I did. So that was definitely something to keep in mind, is that I think the mentor may not always match you in some important ways, but they can still be an important part of your life and your development. So that's definitely something that was true for me. Now, on the other hand, I also have had the experience of mentoring students that were interested in the same topics I am working on and share some important identities. And they have said that that's been important to them, to be able to see someone in the field going in a direction that they maybe hadn't considered, or that they had considered but were afraid they couldn't achieve. So in that sense, it's something that I have heard has helped other students to see themselves in the position, right? As a psychologist, as a professor, right? Things like that. But I definitely feel like it's important to, I feel comfortable mentoring anybody that's interested in the same kind of areas or topics, which I think I could be most helpful in. I've mentored, I think, students of every possible background. So I don't know, in terms of EDI, yes, the topics are always central to the work if we're talking about academic mentoring, but the identities have always varied in different ways. Yeah, I'm not sure if that answers your question.
Yeah, it does. And I think it's such a good point to remind ourselves that again, there's no perfectionism, right? We can't be the absolute perfect match for everybody who wants to work with us, nor can we ever have all the identities and all the same intersections. And that's okay. And so if your focus is commitment to the same work and the same values, then you can still work together. And again, your reminder of there's also undercover mentoring. There's also mentoring in a lot of other avenues. So you don't have to, even if you have a main advisor, say formally for academics, it doesn't mean you can't have other people that you turn to or who inspire you. And so you'll be able to get those pieces that might be missing in other ways as well. And I think that's such a good reminder because for a lot of folks, maybe there's a reluctance to mentor someone who is from a very different background or and from a good place of worrying about, can I provide all the things? And so it sounds like if you can be really upfront about that and figure out what it is that you do have overlaps in, what things are you both committed to, and to really honestly work on that together, it's okay. There are other mentors in the field for everyone, including undercover ones.
Yeah, that's a great point. One mentor can't be everything to someone, to a mentee. So to keep in mind that they might fulfill certain aspects of the goals that you're pursuing, and maybe other people can meet other areas, and that's okay. That's okay. Yeah, they all are important in different ways.
Jasmine, it's been so fun talking with you about just everything. I feel like you have given so much good advice, not just for mentoring, but honestly for life in general. Like I feel like a lot of people who are listening to this, even if they're not formal mentors, they can listen to this and gain a lot of information from what you've said. With that in mind, I was wondering if you could give a little bit more advice for mentors, but also based on your talk at RMPA. It sounds like you might have some good advice to give to those being mentored. So, is there anything you have to offer in terms of advice for those two groups?
Oh, okay. So, well, for mentors, certainly that what I opened up with, this idea of this profound respect for the other, this profound respect for the other person sitting before you, to always tap into that before you're going to come together with them. And really, I think opens the door for rich conversations that allow the true person's thoughts and feelings and needs come through. I certainly would recommend to check in frequently about the level of responsibility that the person is ready to take on. It may be that they are just ready to take the lead, or it may be that they need some more time to get adjusted to the idea. So that developmental approach and gradually supporting them to get to that place where they can take the lead and make some key decisions, and use the mentor as a consultant more so than as a person that's going to structure things. So I would recommend certainly those two things to consider. For mentees, I really recommend being open with the mentor. You can certainly test the waters and see if you can do so safely, right? So you can open up gradually as you feel comfortable, but to understand that their needs and perspectives are valuable, they matter, and that sometimes your mentor can be wrong. And just because they push you in one direction doesn't mean that they're doing the right thing, doesn't mean that the mentor is always right. And so to keep that in mind, because sometimes it could be that that mentoring relationship is not actually the most beneficial for you. So to consider that possibility first before deeming oneself incapable, incompetent, or inferior. Sometimes it's the mentoring relationship that has to change. But I would also encourage, this is a recommendation for mentors and mentees, consider that you're learning in all of the relationships that you encounter. Consider that you actually could be part of a peer mentoring opportunity. So just because you have some achievements doesn't mean you don't continue to learn and grow from peers or from mentees. So to being open to learning and growing from others, I think is something I would recommend to everyone.
Those are all amazing pieces of advice, but I really loved bringing up information about how maybe it's the mentoring relationship that's wrong. It's not that your abilities are not there. You just might thrive better in other situations where you have somebody that matches more of your needs and your values and the style that you resonate with. I think that's so important for a lot of young students who are just like getting into the field and probably struggle a lot with what you were talking about earlier, this idea of perfectionism over vulnerability. So I think that's really powerful for them to hear that information. Because I think we think those above us are always right. Those with authority and more experience are always right. But that's not always the case. And I think it takes a lot of people, often too long, to learn that.
Yeah, jumping in, that resonated with me too, that same piece and how important it is for us to recognize when we're mentoring that there might be these insecurities or other things that are happening that make it difficult for students to not share when things aren't working for them, right? They may internalize, oh, I did something wrong, right? And it very well could be us, or it could be nobody's fault. It's just not a good fit. And thinking about mentoring from this growth and developmental framework, it actually makes sense that at some point you will outgrow that relationship or the relationship has to change. And I really like this idea of the mentor as a consultant, someone you might use a lot in the beginning when you're learning a particular skill, but over time you might not need that anymore. And that's like, there's no fault or, badness about that. It's a developmental stage that they're going through and you're helping and you're also growing when you're mentoring. So, like I get the privilege of working with Kenzie while she's in this developmental phase, but pretty soon or arguably already, she's outgrown me. And over time, it'll become much more of a peer colleague situation. And maybe over time, she won't need to consult me as much, which is totally fine. But also a reminder that because if we're focused on the growth of all individuals in that relationship, then there's no shame or fault or guilt or these sorts of really heavy things to have difficult conversations where it's, this might have run its course. And, I might need a different mentor for this new direction I'm going in. Or we may need to change the way that we work together because it's no longer serving what we both have as a goal, right, of that mutual growth. So thank you so much for that incredibly important reminder.
Yeah. Well stated. You summarized it really, really well.
And for those of you listening, if this is resonating and you're thinking, ooh, there's something about the relationship I have with my mentor or my mentee that just seems a little off. We encourage you to start having those conversations, recognizing they can be challenging, especially if you haven't talked about those types of things very explicitly before. But keep working at it and come at it from it's not because anyone is faulty or not good enough, right? It's just maybe the style of the relationship or what it is you're focusing on or how things are being done needs to change. So it's an opportunity for growth. It's challenge, not threat. And so thank you so much, Jasmine. This has been such a lovely conversation. We send off our guests with this question about self-care. So I'm just curious what your favorite forms of self-care are as you do all this incredible work.
I have a few, but I'll focus on one. I'll quickly say I knit. I've been knitting for over a couple of decades, and it's something that brings me a lot of joy. I make bread, which I've been doing for years, sourdough, which brings me a lot of joy. But the thing that has captured my heart in the last few years was that I started riding horses, and that is every week, once or twice a week. I ride horses, and those are incredible creatures. It requires the full concentration and presence that you can muster, and in order to communicate, in order to be as one, in order to be safe, all of those things. And it brings me a lot of joy. It nourishes me and fulfills me and gets me ready for the rest of the week. So it's time consuming, but it's worth it. It puts me in a place of peace, calm, presence, and it's just so fun. It's so fun to go fast on a horse.
That sounds amazing. And I appreciate that insight into why you might enjoy it is partly you have to be fully focused and in the moment. And that's such a good reminder because those of us in academia, sometimes we're not very good at not multitasking and not worrying about upcoming deadlines or reliving things in the past. But again, also having that relationship too, right? That communication. So that's something that could be applied to mentoring as well.
Mentorship. Yes,
Yeah.
I had not made that connection until now.
How do we make mentoring more like horse riding?
I'll have to think about that one.
And I do not knit, and I'm not much of a baker, so I'm always very impressed by folks who have those capabilities, because it's lovely to be able to craft and do things with your hands and see an end product that is very enjoyable, right? We don't get to eat our articles, but you get to eat your sourdough and enjoy it with friends, maybe.
And I think that those are potential metaphors too for mentorship, making bread and knitting.
Well, thank you so much, Jasmine. This has been wonderful. And thank you, everyone, for listening. Stay tuned for more episodes in this series.
Thank you very much.